All right, folks, here we are. We're moving into Jeff's book, and we're doing chapters 6 through 10. And there's a good flow to this part of the chapter, like the middle, the meat here. And he goes over a lot of the different things that you need, and it really actually, one chapter leads into the next very well. So this should flow very nicely for you, and this should really build your strategies pretty well. So let's hop into chapter 6. And chapter 6 is something we all need to. You must start doing it. If you don't do it, start doing it. You need to know your numbers. All right, the numbers means how many, and then you may have to decide on what numbers are most important to you, but you have to start following your numbers, like how many cold calls lead to conversions, or how many attempts lead to a conversion, how many leads go to an appointment, how many appointments go into a sale, and start to kind of track some of those things, because you need to know, and we'll talk about later, a little bit later, but it's really a numbers game, and you need to know how many times it takes you to qualify somebody, to lead to an appointment, to make a sale. Because if you don't know those numbers, you don't know where your goals are. You don't know how many people you need to get a hold of. All right, so this is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Another thing that I like to track, and he doesn't necessarily talk about that one, but I like to track, and Kevin makes you do it in your case sheets, where that prospect came from. And Kevin and I really early on made a bet, like when we did one of our classes, that he didn't know where all my prospects came from, or all my sales came from in 1 year. And I did. I knew where every single person came from, and it wasn't by accident. It's because I track. And I know where they're coming from, who my top referrals are coming from, and those are things you really need to know as well. So be sure you have some kind of system to start tracking what's productive for you. And then he talks about the EEP, efficiency. I knew I was going to mess that one up. Efficiency, effectiveness, ease, productivity. So those three things. You have to know what two things lead to your productivity. What efficiency, what things are being effective for you, what things are you doing that lead you to productivity. And he talks about that very briefly, actually, in the chapter, so it doesn't cover it very long. And then the most important part, and what I just talked about with knowing where my leads are coming from, is once you look at those leads at the end of the month, end of the year, end of whatnot, you need to be able to make adjustments. And I definitely do that at least every month, more frequently lately, but when times are slow, you need to be able to look back at your numbers and say, all right, what was happening? Why is it slow now? Or even when things were going well. Things were going well, why were they going well? And start replicating, start duplicating those types of actions. Because if you're not doing that, you're always going to be the roller coaster of a couple of sales and no sales, and a couple of sales and no sales. Your data, the things you are doing, will tell you how to continue being productive if you take the time to listen to yourself and start tracking your numbers. So that's a very important chapter 6. And then he moves into chapter 7, which was pretty short. It was mostly him telling stories about learning how to swim, but we're going to get to the 3 things he did talk about, and these are as common sense as it gets right here. There's 3 things that he says that keep you from being productive, 3 things that keep you from being successful. One is procrastination. Procrastination is obviously just, I'll do it later, I'll do it tonight, I got some things I got to do first. You need to do it now. You need to set a time of day. Do it at that time, no matter what. At 8 a.m. I make calls, or 9 a.m. I do this, at 11 a.m. I do that, and I do it for an hour. And don't procrastinate. That's your block of time to do those things, and if you don't do those things, you're not going to be successful. You're not going to see the productivity that you want. Another one is perfectionism, which is definitely not me. There's so many times where I just jump into a video and I have a general idea of what I'm talking about, but the truth is, I'm doing the video, or I'm doing the phone call, or I'm sitting down for an appointment. I don't always know what I have to say. I don't always sit down and wait for everything to be either right, or I do my research on a person, or wait for everything, the stars to align perfectly. Sometimes you got to pick up the phone. Pick up the phone and kind of feel somebody out and kind of ask your qualifying questions, and just kind of, it's going to happen. But unless you get up there and start not letting things be perfect, you'll be waiting for that moment and it'll pass you by. So don't wait for perfection. And the last one he talks about is paralysis, and that's the reluctance to call. And he says that about 35 times in the chapter. The reluctance to call is just, you don't want to do it. You're scared that they're going to say no. If they say no, you'll be exactly where were you before. It really doesn't matter. It's the same philosophy that I have when I do all these videos is, oh, I don't like the way my hair looks, or this, or what. It doesn't matter. People already know what you look like. Don't have that paralysis. Don't worry about what you look like. I mean, don't have like a big bloody face or a giant black eye or anything crazy, food on your face or any of those things. That's not what I'm saying. My saying is, people already know what you look like. Jump on there, do the videos, make the calls. Don't let your need for failure stop you, because then you're going to fail. That's kind of the interesting part. So you go to chapter 8 as we continue moving on. He starts talking about doing your numbers, reasons to keep moving, and now here's once you do start moving, like I said, have those blocks of time. A lot of these concepts are going to start blending in together, but have a block of time, very specific, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, whatever it's going to be, 3 to 5. There's no set perfect time. There's lots of research, and a lot of people say, call it this time, do this at this time. Just whatever kind of works for you. Don't make it something that's so inconvenient, like a 3 to 5, I'm picking up my kids, and I'm doing this and this and this. Don't do that. Be sure that it's a time that works for you, so you'll be more apt to do it. If you're like, I got a little downtime between 9 to 10 when I dropped off the kids and I'm moving on to this, then make it 9 to 10. That's just your time. Do it. All right. Be sure you have specific activities you do too. Monday I do cold calls, or maybe I do 3 cold calls and then 4 or 5 warm calls, or maybe I do 2 emails, 1 video, and this. Have a very, very set, I need to do these 3 things or 5 things or 8 things in that time frame, all right? Because otherwise you're not tracking anything. You don't know how successful you are, okay? And then he talks in length, actually, at the CEO mindset, and essentially, to break it down, the CEO mindset is that you're the one in charge. You're responsible for your actions, and essentially that the buck stops with you. You're the one that's held responsible for the things that go well. You're held responsible for things that don't do well. You're held responsible for making the adjustments, so that way you get back on the track of success. That CEO mindset is you're the one that's in charge, all right, and you have to make all the decisions and be responsible for the actions and results of those decisions. So it's a pretty interesting philosophy. If you get a chance, go back through and look at that too. It's really well said. He moves into golden hours. He says the only time, there's a few excuses to not do what you're supposed to be doing during those golden hours, which is the time you're prospecting and calling people and following up with people. And he says there's a few reactions to not being able to produce during those times. And one is you delude yourself that everything's just fine, everything's great. I seem to be doing well. I think I'm doing good. And you're not really tracking anything. You're kind of feeling your way. And, I feel like it's doing great, which is not really helping you whatsoever because you're going to feel yourself be poor here in a second. Next one is prioritize. If you prioritize, you're like, during that golden hour, things have to happen. It doesn't seem like I'm doing a good job. I need to make my adjustments, and I need to start getting back on track. That's the second reaction to your golden hours and necessarily not getting things done. And the last one is to delegate. And delegate's not a bad. If you find yourself getting really, really busy, it's okay to have somebody help you with some of those things, an assistant, or maybe you have like a bomb thing where you send it out automatically, and maybe if you're in a rush, you do a quick bomb video to 10 people, and that covers your 10 phone calls, your 10 touches. You can delegate those things to a person or a machine or an automated system or what have you. Just don't delegate like all the time. Just make sure you're delegating certain times. You can even set a block for certain times, like Wednesday I delegate, Friday I delegate, whatever works best for you. Certainly be sure you're making those calls and tracking your numbers and doing those things. And then he ends the chapter talking about, ends the chapter with 2 things. He goes on a little rant about how the cell phone and emails are distractors, how we need to put those things away, the emails and cell phones and things that keep you from being productive in that golden hour. And he gives a bunch of examples of places he's been where people will make a call and then sit on their phone for 5 minutes and then check out Facebook and then make another call, and they make like 10 calls in an hour. And then he makes examples of people that learn how to put that phone away, put Facebook away, and they can make 100 calls in an hour or 50 calls in an hour. So you have to also track to see what's distracting you too. And he goes on a big rant about those things. And then he ends on the know your worth. You know your value. You know that you're an important person. You're the CEO. You're in charge of all these things. You're in charge of avoiding the procrastination and perfectionism and your paralysis and getting results. All right. So know your worth. I'm worth $50,000 a year. I'm worth $75,000 a year. I'm worth whatever. Know your worth. Know your value. And then we're gonna start moving into 9. 9. And this is really important. It seems so common sense. Have an objective. So you just don't call a person. I know I just talked about being a perfectionist. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is have a goal, an objective. When I call a buyer, I'm going to ask them if they've talked to a lender before. I'm going to ask them if they know what the market is, how much they can afford, what their income is in general, or even credit scores. You're going to ask some qualifying questions. If I'm talking to a seller, I'm asking them how old the house is, some things they like about their house, how many acres. Have some things in mind that you're going to ask them every time. Have an objective, because if you just call and say hi and how you're doing, then it's not going to work. unless your goal is just to touch base and see how they're doing. And then you do have an objective. So be sure you know why you're calling them. You have an objective, have something ready to go. Otherwise, you're wasting time. And then he talks about the objective of almost every call is to set appointments, right? You're going to try to sit in front of somebody. You're going to set appointments to go see their house, or even just sit down and have lunch with them, or have a meeting with them, or whatever the case may be. You're always setting appointments, but that always goes back to the objective, all right? Know what you're trying to get to, try to set that appointment, and that's why you're trying to make these phone calls, or emails, or text messages, or videos, whatever you're working on. And then he comes back to the idea of knowing your worth by spending time with qualified leads. My original reaction always is cold leads. Are cold leads good leads, bad leads? But you have to ask those questions, those qualifying questions, to know whether that cold lead is also a qualified lead. I mean, that's a big thing. Just because they were looking at a house or clicked a button and checked out a house doesn't mean they're a qualified lead. They might be cold. They might not be looking for 8 months or 10 months, 1 year. They may refuse to talk to a lender or whatnot. So those are the way you have to see which kind of people, through your qualifying questions, are also people you want to keep calling and keep getting on and stay in front of, all right? And so those are the people you want to spend the time with, not the person that refuses to talk to a lender or doesn't tell you what the address of their house is or whatnot, all right? And then I'm going to reiterate, like he does talk about developing questions, but that's a theme that's going throughout. And you by now either know the kind of questions you need to ask your leads, your cold leads, warm leads, whoever, or you need to sit down and come up with some. And don't make it too complicated. Have like 2 or 3, all right? And make some of them open-ended. What are some things you love about your house? All right, what are some things you don't like about the house? Or what would you like to be someday? Have some kind of questions that get them talking about themselves, talking about the house, talking about where they want to be, their goals, and be a good, solid listener. And then he finishes that chapter with, if you don't have a plan, you're just wasting your time. And he knows too many companies. He gave some examples of companies that they would just make calls and just try to make calls and didn't really have a plan or didn't collect the information or track the data, and they just were making calls, and it was very unsuccessful. All right, so make sure you keep yourself together, objectives, set appointments, ask questions. Don't waste your time. Be sure you know your worth. Good, and then chapter 10, the last one, is really short, and it's really straight to the point. And it's following up on the idea of spending time with qualified leads. He talks about the pyramid theory. And essentially the pyramid theory is like the best leads, the best qualified people are at the top, the most people we have information about. And at the very bottom is your least favorite. They don't have as much qualified information. You don't want to spend as much time with them just because they don't want to spend as much time with you. But the best leads are the people that you can give information to, you can help them, and that kind of stuff. And then that helps you at the end of the day when you get your power of hour or 2 hours or your golden hours or whatever you're doing to know who you should be calling.